My name is Jane Clark, and I'm happy to welcome you today to our Capital Connections virtual event. And also a very special thanks to today's program sponsors, our Advocacy in Action mission sponsors. I'd like to turn it over to our guest moderator today, Michael Hill of Coldbrook Insurance Company. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Jane. We're fortunate to have Kevin Courtois with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He's the Executive Director of Congressional and Public Affairs, and he's going to give us an update from their perspective on how the election went.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me once again. Thanks to you and to Jane for your leadership in Western Michigan. And Jane, thank you for your leadership nationally in what I call Chamber world, but serving on our committee of 100, the U.S. Chamber. We appreciate all that you're doing to help us at a federal level. And as always, appreciate your partnership. You're probably sick of hearing about the election at this point, almost 2 weeks out, but I think we'll do a quick recap and then talk about a little bit of what we're thinking at the U.S. Chamber. When we look at election and the results, of course, it's, we knew that it would take a little time to get, full results. And quite frankly, there are still some races that are outstanding or haven't been called yet. And then we have some important Senate races down in Georgia that have gone to a runoff. But when I take a look at kind of a snapshot of election night, of course, we were delivered kind of split results. So, of course, Joe Biden won the White House, so we're going to see a change there. But voters also delivered, wins for Republicans in the House of Representatives, where they've picked up 11 seats and with a few still outstanding. So we're going to see a slimmer Democratic majority in the House. And then I mentioned 2 Senate races that are going to runoffs in Georgia. It is our belief that at the end of the day, we'll end up with a Republican Senate. So maintaining a pro-business majority in the Senate, which was a key priority for the chamber. Specifically in Michigan, some of the results, as you all know by now, we didn't see any big surprises in the House. Some of the more moderate or what you might think of as vulnerable members were able to hang on to their seats, and we saw Alyssa Slotkin and Haley Stevens out east, and then of course Fred Upton, who's just been a real champion of business, carries a strong bipartisanship message, was a recipient of our bipartisanship award earlier this year. He was able to pull off a decisive victory there. So that's good to see. And in the Senate race, of course, Gary Peters was able to hang on to his seat. And then as a result, nationally, we saw a slimmer majority in the House for the Democrats, and then what we think will be a Republican Senate moving into next year. Interestingly, Joe Biden will be the first Democratic president to enter his presidency without his party controlling the Senate. First president since 1884, first Democratic president, the first president overall in the last 30 years. So typically, president's will go into his first term enjoying some, majority support in the Senate, able to push through policies. But I think this is going to shape how we see kind of the next 2 years playing out. Big picture, we saw record turnout, which is always a good thing. We saw record spending, the amount spent in Michigan, $167 million on just that Senate race alone. Additionally, we saw a lot of the members in problem solving in the House, or a lot of these kind of centrist members hang on to their seats. Why this is important. So moving ahead, when we have a divided government, it's an effort the U.S. Chamber has to kind of rebuild the middle. And right now that's going to be more important than ever to be engaging with those members of Congress and helping them help the business community in the issues that matter most to us. In divided government, it's not going to be one party pushing through all of their, their policy hopes and getting that through, which quite frankly, some were anticipating, with a Biden presidency, potentially complete Democratic control. If Republicans do keep the Senate, then there will be the need for compromise in order to get anything meaningful done. Looking at what this all means for after the elections, so we're going to move into a lame duck session now, which is actually already started. And what we're prioritizing is a phase 4 COVID relief bill. So if we rewind to March when the CARES Act passed, $3 trillion of spending, Congress has kind of taken time off since then, right? The House passed a bill in May, an additional $3 trillion, but we haven't seen any meaningful progress toward negotiating a phase 4 relief bill. Senator Victory talked about kind of that light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to get there. And what we saw in the CARES Act was some programs like the PPP that were meant to be a bridge to that light at the end of the tunnel, to the other side. And what we're experiencing is it was more of a pier rather than a bridge, because we're seeing the fall off and in a K-shaped recovery where some industries are thriving and doing okay, others are not. So for some of those that are still left behind, what we want to see is meaningful action and targeted action taken in a phase 4 relief bill through programs like the PPP, expanding and revising that program, including some state and local funding. I know budget concerns at a state and local level, are real. And you think about some, for example, infrastructure investment. We weren't driving for some time, and that those funds going into the state coffers, won't be replenished. We're just not going to see that. So while we see, state and local governments struggling to meet some of their, demand through their budgets, hope to get some state and local funding included there. A key part of this, and our top priority in getting a phase 4 relief bill done, is liability protection. And I think you're finally going to start hearing this kind of bubble up as a key part of what any type of COVID relief package includes. I think some of the other big funding things were real headline grabbers before the election, but now what we've been pushing for is liability protection for businesses, because we know businesses who are trying to do the right thing, following federal, state, and local guidelines, keeping their employees safe and their customers safe, but they're also dealing with the virus, right? So this is how it spreads and where it spreads. It's difficult to determine. And so businesses operating, doing the right thing, what we're looking for is some timely, targeted, and temporary liability protections, so they cannot be turn around and be sued for either providing those protections or not providing those protections. It's an interesting dynamic we see out there where businesses are being sued from both sides for not doing enough or doing too much to enforce some of these safety guidelines. So what we're hearing from our members is what they need is that liability protection, especially when it comes to something like a global pandemic and a virus where it's difficult to nail down, where one might actually contract this.
So Kevin, to dive more into the liability, that's it's been a hot topic, at least on the Republican side of for the next relief bill. What is the likelihood that you think that some liability protections are going to be included in round 4 that you reference?
So I think the key here is to really look to Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate, so Republican leader. He has said that any bill that goes through the Senate will have liability protection. So he's not going to bring a vote to the floor without liability protection. We want to pay attention to leadership, likely at all levels, but especially the federal government, where if Leader McConnell is going to go to the table, and he has said, along with Speaker Pelosi, that both have said after the election that this is a top priority, which is why I'm hopeful it can get done in a lame duck session, that I think they understand the urgency of this. And especially now that we're looking at a new wave and new, local kind of restrictions being implemented, both have said that this is a priority. And then I look to Leader McConnell's previous comments where no piece of legislation will pass the Senate without including liability protections. We engaged in an effort to connect with Democratic leaders or lawmakers in the House who might be willing to help us push this message with leadership. And this is where it's really important, is we know that the Republican Senate would be behind this, and we need to, work with Democratic leadership in the House to convince them of an importance of including some type of legal protection. I think at the beginning you received pushback that, this isn't a blanket immunity from any type of liability, but that it's timely, targeted, and temporary, that what the business community is asking for is something limited in scope to the pandemic. We're not looking to reform, we're not looking for large-scale legal reform. We want something that's targeted to the pandemic, hoping that that message gets through and that we're able to get that to the Democratic House leadership so that we can include, very targeted piece of liability protection in there. So I'm hopeful that'll get done, and that a package will get done, and that Leader McConnell looked at his words that it won't pass without the liability protection.
So if you had to handicap this and place a bet on the likelihood of something happening during lame duck, what is the percentage that you think that something's actually going to happen?
Yeah, I try to avoid giving percentages, not my favorite thing, but I would say it's given the comments from leadership. I would say we have a more than 50% chance of getting this done. And so I'm taking them at their word that this is a priority and they understand the urgency of it. And especially when you look at the fact that we've gone months now without them addressing the issue. Someone might say you look at an election and there's different reasons why, there's different interests before an election. Well, now the election's over. So now it's time to get back to work. And, we have all of that time that's built up where, businesses and individuals have really needed some assistance. So it's time for them to step up. So I think we have a decent chance at getting this through. I think it would be, where I haven't seen comments from President-elect on this, but I would imagine that he would want something like this taken care of so that he can then, focus on other issues right away, or on implementing the relief bill once he's there, instead of having to then work with Congress to get something through. That will take up more time. So probably communicating what he wants to see in this with Democratic leadership at the moment is likely what's going on, so that his administration can be ready to get right into implementation once they're there.
Perfect. You mentioned this briefly, but just a follow-up question. Do you expect the chamber to play any role in the races going on in Georgia?
I do, yes. So we have an active PAC, we're an active political program. There is going to be a lot of money poured into Georgia, over the next couple of months. And we work with our political program, seeing how to be most effective and sharing that message. So Senator Perdue, current U.S. Senator, he had, I haven't seen the latest numbers, just under 50%. So in Georgia, they have a rule where the candidate has to receive 50% in order to be declared, a winner. And he got just under 50%. There was I think it was a Libertarian candidate on the ticket, which brought his vote total down. But I expect him to do well in this election. He was almost there. Senator Kelly Leffler, was an appointed senator in Georgia, she wasn't as high of a mark. So there were two Republicans running in that race. A popular Republican congressman was running kind of to the right of where Leffler was, and so they kind of split Republican votes there. And so I think what we're shaping up to see, I would anticipate both sitting senators winning re-election, but it's going to be a fierce battle there in Georgia, and I don't envy Georgians and what they're about to endure in terms of political advertising. But we will be active in seeing how we can best engage and help keep a pro-business majority in the Senate.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I think I did kind of interrupt you as you were working through your bullet points. So are there any other items that you want to make sure that our membership is aware of that the Chamber's working on?
So we talk a lot about COVID relief, as we should, and again, that's the top priority. Then you have to think through what else will Congress and the new administration do. And so I'll leave you with just a couple thoughts on, with the assumption of a Republican majority in the Senate, what can possibly get done. This is what I expect to see first on the administrative side from a President Biden and his administration. We're going to see a lot of strong regulatory action at the beginning, which quite frankly we see from any new president from an opposite party, where a lot of the action that's taken, Congress has delegated a lot of authority, and we see regulatory action. We saw it with Obama, especially toward the end of his presidency when we had divided government. He did a lot of the policy making through regulatory action and executive orders. And we saw President Trump come in and undo a lot of that, a lot of those policies and implement his own policies through regulatory action and executive order. So I think we can anticipate seeing President Biden do exactly the same, reverse a lot of what President Trump has done, and look to get a lot of things done, especially with divided government, through those regulatory actions. So the president-elect he campaigned as a consensus builder, and he prides himself on having that history in the Senate. I think it's going to be interesting to seeing if he's able to do that in a new divided government. There are certain issues that I think are primed to move forward under divided government. First of that being infrastructure. We've started a campaign to urge Congress to pass meaningful infrastructure investment by July 4th. So that's not only bridges and roads, which is important, but also things like broadband. One of the key takeaways, I think, from this pandemic and how we've kind of evolved or responded is that a lot of areas are lacking access to broadband, and how businesses and schools and other institutions stay up and running and able to connect. So some type of infrastructure investment, I think is, that's going to be our next priority after COVID relief. I think it's something where both parties have demonstrated support, and it'll come down to how we're going to pay for this, which is an important conversation to have. And yes, we do need to pay for it. And I think that's a key issue where they may start looking for actually getting something through in divided government. I mentioned kind of the regulatory actions. I think we'll see the new administration perhaps using enforcement as a policy tool. So a lot of businesses the government buys a lot of stuff, goods and services. And so through contracts, things like that, they're able to kind of implement some of those policies by putting requirements in for private actors in those types of situations. After infrastructure, I think we may turn our attention back to workforce, seeing some meaningful progress getting done there. If you remember, probably last time we were talking, it may have been the number one issue. It certainly was across the region and across the country, was with low unemployment that we were enjoying before COVID, was finding workers and getting them skilled up for those positions in a growing economy. And of course, we want to be in a growing economy, and we want to, continue that growth especially once we're all through this. So I think workforce will be another issue where we'll be able to make some meaningful progress.
Awesome. Kevin, that's fantastic. We appreciate the work that you're doing on our behalf at the national level.